Hey guys, welcome to another exciting episode of Éire's Epics in History. I'm your host, John Fisher. Before we get started, I want to make one correction from yesterday's video. After Arthur Griffith died from a brain hemorrhage, he was replaced by William Cosgrave. That's William Cosgrave, not Cosgrove, as I said yesterday. So yes, I did make a mistake, but that's okay because that's the whole point of this video series, is to learn and grow. Now, with that said, we're going to just dive right in because we've got a lot to cover. So we ended yesterday with the Civil War in Ireland, which was between the two factions that had split from Sinn Féin. You have the provisional government that's been set up under the 1921 Anglo-Irish Treaty, and that's led by Arthur Griffith and Michael Collins, both of whom die during the Civil War, unfortunately. And then you have de Valera, who was the president of the Éire, and he ends up resigning because he doesn't agree with the treaty and the negotiations. He and his followers, they set up a party of their own, a Republican Party. Now, I mentioned this yesterday, but we're going to talk more about it today. So, basically, in 1923, de Valera, he calls a ceasefire to the Civil War. Now, basically, the provisional government, they were really gaining on the efforts of the anti-treaty troops, and de Valera realizes that his party has no chance. It's impossible for his side to win, basically. So in 1923, he declares a ceasefire. In 1926, his Republican Party is named Fáil, but they don't take their seats in the Éire until the following year. And if we speed up 5 years later to 1932, that year de Valera actually wins the general election, and he and his party, they set up a new government. And part of their win came from a disillusionment among the Irish people. The Irish people were disillusioned with the element of partition in the Anglo-Irish Treaty. There had been no changes made in the territory of Northern Ireland as a result of deliberations made by the Boundary Commission set up. At the same time, there were the world economy at the time was in pretty bad shape. Just a few years beforehand, in 1929, we experienced the Wall Street crash, and food exports from Ireland were also very low. And so as a result, that hit farmers pretty hard. And so they blamed the government, and they wanted a new party in power. And that's what led to Fine Gael coming about. Also, what you need to realize is there were a number of incidents after the Civil War that threatened peace and stability. Kevin O'Higgins, for instance, was assassinated in 1927 on his way to Mass. O'Higgins replaced Michael Collins after his death during the Civil War as chairman of the provisional government. At the same time, due to around this time, there was a separate Republican Party that emerged from Sinn Féin. I'm not sure if it was de Valera's or if it was another Republican group, but it leads to this unpopular public safety bill that had tough measures, and that leads to Sinn Féin's defeat in 1932. So a number of factors contribute to Sinn Féin's defeat and the rise of Fine Gael. Now, upon getting into office, de Valera's government just is ready to get their Republican agenda up there. And the first thing they want to do is get rid of the oath of allegiance to the British crown. So they go about doing that. They want to promote native industries in Ireland and less of British industries. And they also refuse to pay land annuities to the British government. Now, these land annuities were repayments for loans the British government had dished out to farmers in order for the farmers to buy out their holdings from local landlords. They were dished out as part of the Windham Land Act of 1903, and they amounted to about £5 million annually. So basically, the British, they don't like this, and in retaliation, they end up taxing Irish cattle exports. And then the Irish Free State retaliates by adding extra duties to imported British goods. And so it just becomes this economic war back and forth between the British and the Irish. Now, because of the incidents I just mentioned, Kevin O'Higgins' assassination, the Army Mutiny in 1924, and the unpopular Public Safety Bill, the government, both the Sinn Féin government after the Civil War and de Valera's government, they end up facing a lot of challenges and risks that threaten the stability of Ireland. And de Valera feels this, especially with former colleagues of his in the IRA, and ends up declaring the organization illegal in 1936 and again after World War II. He declares the organization illegal, but his government is successful in that it is able to restore law and order to the country. And both governments actually made a significant impact on the country after the Civil War. Sinn Féin, right after the Civil War, we see things like a new judicial system to replace the British and Sinn Féin systems. Education becomes compulsory. Irish language lessons are introduced. The government tries to help poor farmers, which make up 70% of the population. They set up a Garda, which is like a police force. And by the way, de Valera ends up setting up an industrial base. This is when he's restored. Part of his efforts to restore peace and stability in Ireland included setting up a Garda Síochána. It's very hard for me to pronounce, but basically it was an unarmored police force. And he also set up an industrial base in Ireland. But Sinn Féin, like I said, also contributed with its own accomplishments, its own contributions. It sets up its own Garda, its own police force in Ireland, and it introduces religious freedom. And you actually end up having, and interesting enough, they introduced the new and current flag in Ireland. So the flag in Ireland, you'll know, has a green stripe, an orange stripe, and a white stripe. The green stripe represents Catholics, the orange stripe represents Protestants, and the white stripe in between them represents the peace maintained between them to signify the end of the tension and animosity between them with the signing of the Anglo-Irish Treaty and the setup of the Irish Free State. And what ends up happening is, and these are just a couple of contributions. Also, in 1926, Radio Éire is introduced. In 1929, the Shannon scheme is used to leverage the hydroelectric capabilities of the Shannon River to bring electricity to Ireland. And this helps Ireland significantly because it reduces British administration, introduces significant economic projects. It also helps Ireland create this new national identity, gain international recognition, and it brings about financial and social benefits to the country. Now, going back to de Valera, in 1937, we see the introduction of the Constitution, the current Constitution used by Ireland today. It's been amended several times, but de Valera introduces it in 1937, and it declares Ireland a sovereign, independent, democratic state. And it also sets up the post of president. And in 1938, a man by the name of Dr. His name is, oh God, I'm totally blanking on his name. Dr. Douglas Hyde. Had to read my notes for a bit. But Dr. Douglas Hyde, who was a founder of the Gaelic League, one of the founders of the Gaelic League of 1893, he's elected as the first president of Ireland. And also, in 1938, Ireland finally ends the economic war with Great Britain. It pays back 1/10 of the annuities to Great Britain, and in return, Britain gives up the 3 naval ports that it retained under the 1921 treaty. And these ports were in 3 places. One was Berehaven, one was Cobb, and one was Loughswilly. I just want to make sure I'm saying that right. Yes, Loughswilly. And this is very significant because giving up these ports, Britain saw these ports as essential to its defense. By giving them up, it now knows that Ireland can be used as a staging post for any attack against Great Britain. And it's an advantage for Ireland, especially during World War II, because now because Britain doesn't have any specific ties to these territories as to any territory in Ireland from a military standpoint, it allows Ireland to maintain a policy of neutrality during World War II. Now, World War II, the years of the war are referred to as the emergency during the war, and de Valera introduces a policy of neutrality. Ireland does not get directly involved in the war, and it boosts de Valera's popularity, and it signifies Ireland's independence from Great Britain. Now, that being said, many Irish did join the British regiments because they sympathized with smaller countries being dominated by a larger country like Germany. Also, there was economic hardship as a result of the war. Many industries built up by the government were damaged, partially because they were actually being bombed during the war. There were bombings in Ireland, not as many as there were in Great Britain, but still, there were bombings. And also there was rationing going on. Commodities were scarce. So the Irish do face some hardships. However, the war also gave them a sense of national pride and reinvigorates their spirit. It emphasizes the need for self-reliance, and it also helps heal wounds from the Civil War because it brings together people with different political views and encourages them to work together to keep Ireland moving. So, we definitely are seeing a lot of changes throughout the 1920s, 30s, and 40s in Ireland. And these changes still today play a significant role in Ireland's success as a country. We see it emerging on the international stage and finally being taken seriously. We're going to get more into that over the next 2 days. God, I can't believe we only have 2 more days left. But so until then, thank you so much. I very much appreciate it. I appreciate you following me and sharing these videos. Please comment below if you have any questions or feedback. Have a good night.